Well, welcome to the Santa Barbara Historic Museum. My name is Ann Luna. I'm your docent for today. Today we're going to do a lesson to learn about the Chumash and the Spanish and determine what things were here before the Spanish arrived and what things the Chumash were already using before the Spanish arrived. So I have a bowl here with different things, and I'll pick one item and we'll decide what it is. Let's pick the biggest item here first. Abalone shell. So the Chumash used this for decoration, the shiny part right here to make earrings, fish hooks. Also the Chumash used it as a bowl. See the holes down here? What does it look like? Something in your kitchen? It looks like a colander. They could clean things with this bowl and the dirt would go out right there. Chumash would have used this. The Spanish didn't bring it here. I'm placing it on the straw mat for Chumash, and the red mat will be for the Spanish. Okay, here we have a horse. So were horses here when the Chumash lived here, or did the Spanish bring them? Guess what? The Spanish brought them. The Spanish brought these horses on their ships. Can you imagine that, living for 2 years on a ship with a horse? I think they were probably baby horses when they came across. But think about that, living with a horse for 2 years. Okay, we have a lemon here. Guess what? The Spanish brought this here. Yes, our area didn't have any fruit trees of any kind like this. The citrus, the olive trees, apple trees, all those things were brought here by the Spanish. Beads here. Here's a big bead that the Chumash would have used. This is Chumash. They had a system of money, and they used beads. They were larger ones like this and smaller ones, but they would make these beads, and it would be a system of money. So if they wanted to figure out how much they could trade for, they would use beads. And how would you measure that? Well, they take your hand and you wrap it around, and how many times around would be how much you would trade for. This is Chumash. Okay, we have some corn here, also known as maize. And this is kind of tricky because there are a lot of Native Americans that use maize and corn. But guess what? Santa Barbara Native Americans, the Chumash, didn't use corn. The Spanish brought it with them in their travels where they did meet tribes that had corn. So the Spanish brought this here. Here we have a tule reed and some more dry pieces of tule. Now, the Chumash used these to make their homes. They would make big bundles of these, put them over a willow frame, and be big mats, and they would use that to make their homes called aps. This is Chumash. Okay, here. This is a coin here. It says King Carlos III. Now, King Carlos, he was the king at the time when they wanted to settle Santa Barbara. He said, let's bring some more people to Santa Barbara. And he decided to do that. So this is a coin from Spain. Here we have an example also of a ship, a Spanish galleon. There's another a model of what it would have looked like. Now, the Spanish galleon, obviously, is from Spain. Okay? The Chumash didn't have this kind of sailing vessel. The Chumash were very impressed with it because of all the men it carried on board and all the cargo that it had that they could trade with. Here we have a tomol. Now, that is Chumash. And the tomol is made out of a wood called redwood. But guess what? We have no redwood trees here in Santa Barbara. So where did they come from? Where did the trees come from that they used to make this canoe called a tomol? Well, Northern California has redwood trees, and they naturally fall in the ocean, and they float down to the Channel Islands, and the Chumash learned how to pick up these logs, make planks, and put them together to make a tomol. They used these to cross over the Channel Islands, to to go fishing, and the child had an important job in the tomo. They would bail the water out because they were the smallest person. While they're crossing the channel, a wave would hit you, and the child would bail the water out of the tomo. Another kind of shell, the chumash. They would use this kind of shell for different things. This shell had a sharp edge. When they caught a fish, or they maybe killed a deer or a rabbit for food, they used this sharp edge to scrape the skin off. Also, if they wanted to drink some water, they could drink water from it as well. The chumash used this kind of shell for many different things. So for my bowl here, I also have a cow. So were cows here? Nope. The chumash didn't have any cows. The Spanish brought these on their sailing vessels. Again, living on a ship like this, with a cow and a horse and all kinds of food, were on that same ship. For 2 years, the first cows came over. So what do you think, baby cows or big cows? I think it's a baby cow when you came across. So these are acorns. They come from an oak tree, and the chumash would use these to eat. And I don't think they just bite them. Do you think they just bite them? No, they wouldn't just bite them. They have to break it open. They take the nut that's inside, the seed, and they would crush it. Then they pour hot water over it to take the bitterness, the tannins out of it, so they could eat it. Now, chumash, they ate lots of these with every meal, with fish, with venison, with rabbit. Every meal they had acorn mush. But how many thousands of pounds do you think it took for a family, say 5 or 6 people? Mom and dad, 2 kids, and a grandma and a grandpa. 3,000 pounds per family. So they had to do this all year long, gather the acorns. Here we have an image of a cave painting. Now the Chumash did these cave paintings, and the Chumash used these to talk about their history and things they did. Like, for example, do you take pictures when you go on a vacation or you go on a trip camping? Same thing. They would record things like earthquake, a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse, pictures about hunting. They'd write these on the walls of caves. Has anyone been to paint a cave? Yes, okay. And you've seen some of these images. Also, let's take a look. We have a basket here. The Chumash wove these baskets. They would use similar reeds, not quite like the tule that we have here, but other reeds and natural plants to weave the baskets with different colors. And they would use these to carry acorns. Also, they were waterproof. They could put hot water in them because they would coat the inside with tar to make them waterproof. So the Chumash would have had the baskets here. The Spanish didn't bring them here. Now, how did they grind those acorns? What do you think they used to grind the acorns? See this mortar and pestle? It's a stone bowl with a rock to grind the acorns. They would have used something similar to that. Now, in the forest and the different places you would find in big boulders and big rocks that are near the water, you'd find holes in the big rocks. And they use those same holes to grind in there when they're near the water. Now, the Chumash, remember we talked about them living in the Alps with this type of tule? But the Spanish, they lived in adobe structures. They had bricks made of mud mixed with water and straw to make bricks to build a house. They're called adobe bricks. Now you have an example of one on the edge of our table here. They would make these bricks, lots and lots of them to build homes. Our museum is built in that style. So if you ever come here, you'll see a style of adobe structure here at our museum. We also have 2 old historic adobes that were built, almost 200 years ago. So when you come back to our museum to visit, you'll see the 200-year-old adobe. We also have an iron stirrup. Now, back in the old days, they were very fancy. And this kind of stirrup would have been used in the days when Coronado was first exploring the Western Hemisphere. Now, by the time they got here, they didn't have such heavy armor like this. They had lighter uniforms and lighter horse stirrups. But that's an example of some of the early stuff that would have come from Spain. And also, since they brought the cows, the Spanish would use the cows for a lot of different things. So what do you think they used the cows for? Well, they would make a leather belt, leather shoes, and they'd also make these trunks like this, covered with leather, to give it more of a fancy look and to protect the inside of the trunk. So leather was used for many different things. But there's one more thing that they used in the cow. What do you think what one more thing is? The fat of the cow. It's called tallow. Now they used that to make soap and candles. It was pretty stinky soap and pretty stinky candles, but that's what they knew how to use. Today we use different things. So this is a religious beads for the Catholic Church. Now when Spain was settling the Western Hemisphere, it was a rule that to be a Spanish citizen, you had to be the Catholic faith. So they brought this religion with them when they came from Spain. But now we're part of the United States, so we have a different kind of rule. What do you think that rule is? Freedom of religion. We can practice what we believe and what we choose to believe. But the Spanish brought this in the beginning, and that was their rule. Well, I want to thank you for listening to my presentation about the Chumash and the Spanish. I want you to check your activity and see if you guessed correctly whether it was Chumash or Spanish. And if you need more assistance, you can come back to our museum and visit to learn more about our California history and our Spanish history and all our histories of different times in Santa Barbara.